got this voice. For better or for worse, I've got this voice. I didn't ask for it. It just happened. Now, it's certainly not for everybody, but for some.
Scott, give us a brief overview of the nature of this creative process, how it works.
Basically, the process is built on a series of exercises which is geared toward helping people get in touch with their creative selves. I've often said that one of the important things you have to do in the creative process is get out of your own creative way. So it gets people in touch with their creative self and also how to work in this space in collaboration with other people. And so there's a series of exercises which we go through. Through these exercises start to develop these particular sensitivities. It's, in a way, a bit like creating an environment, both internally and externally, in which you can conjure things. And when these things are revealed, then you make a choice to go with one of these things, and that's the realization of it or the manifestation of it. And I think you'll get a better idea as we move into the different states of the exercises.
Scott always came back to the fact that he needed to do his classes. He said, all I really want is just a place to do my classes, whatever that takes, you know? And that was one thing we kept through the whole time. If you ever show up with a set on it, the set had to be cleared in order for the classes, you know?
He had people coming who were like lawyers and doctors and housewives, you know, and just people who are not in that performing arts world at all, but found that just taking your hands and going kind of opens up something, because that's outside their normal experience, because you're not allowed to go you know, just on your own. You need someone to give you the opportunity and the permission to just go and that unloads something in each of us.
And I forget what the exercise was, but I was doing with Densmore, and it was a two-on, and we were just the two of us. He as a musician, I'm imagining, probably experienced this all the time as a musician. I don't know if they'd ever experienced it on stage verbally before, but I had never experienced this at all. And that's just getting up, and whatever the exercise was, I forget, but it was like back and forth, and it was, and it was wonderful. I mean, we were like, it was so fast, it was faster than you could think, and it was totally in tune, and it was hysterical. People were laughing, like, you know, it was just, and it built to a climax, and then it was boom!
Scott wasn't at that, and people would ask for that because that was the standard format. When are we going to get up on stage and make people laugh or make people cry or do this, do a piece, do a class piece? When are we going to be able to show the effect of this? And Scott knew deep down that this was training.
I've divided the whole process into three general states. One is called a state of deliberation, which is essentially a state related to the understanding of presence, the awareness of what's happening around you and within you. It's geared toward seeing and hearing. In other words, it starts from zero, and it's all about seeing things again for the first time, over and over and over again. And that's that state of deliberation. There's another state, which is state of sound and movement, which also are a series of exercises in which you conjure images and then make a choice to go with one of those images that are conjured. And then there's another one called rap, and the same thing takes place in rap, except you're working with words. And when you hit upon certain things that you like, then you make the choice to play these particular things. And I can elaborate on each one of those as we approach a demonstration of each of the states.
So tell me, Scott, what are we going to see in this first sequence?
Well, that'll be the first of these states, which is called deliberation. There's a whole series of exercises. And deliberation is essentially about being aware of whatever it is you're doing while you're doing it. So me being aware of what I'm doing right now is me already doing deliberation. Also being aware of myself and my relationship with anything that I might be perceiving at that particular moment. And then you begin. It starts on a very basic level where people just enter the space. And the thing to understand also is that these people have been doing these exercises for a while. So even though they're still at a very basic fundamental level in terms of what we're presenting here, and I hopefully will be able to explain where the exercises go from there, these people have been doing this for a while. Deliberation, which is an exercise that is largely about being aware of both the self and everything that the self has a relationship with. So deliberation is really moving into the space with an awareness of the self, its relationship to things in the space, and eventually that moves into an awareness of thoughts that might be going through your minds, feelings you might be having, and then also through a process of empathy, seeing that outside of you, which informs you of something, and then making a choice to go with it.
I think the Actors Gang began at his studio. John Fleck is really great. He's done that. Kedrick Wolf, amazing performer.
I was drumming with Tim Robbins' Actors Gang. Tim was not famous yet. He hadn't done Bull Durham. And they were performing at the Wall & Boyd Theater, Scott's Theater in Los Angeles, downtown. And I could sense this sort of, in the 80s in downtown LA, there was a community of artists and theater people, and it felt a little like the 60s, like seekers, searchers, trying to get to the essence of the moment, of the truth.
And let's get right down to it, Scott. What kind of, why should I go to one of your plays as opposed to one of the others that are in Los Angeles right now? I understand you're doing something very different and innovative.
Yeah, why should you go to one of my plays instead of somebody else's? Well, it depends upon what you want. I kind of resist a question like that, really, because it sets up a competitive environment, and that's one of the things that I think, as far as the arts are concerned, is, especially in terms of the way it's related to, the way it's conducted, for the most part in our society, that really gets in the way of it.
I see.
It has a competitive environment, and therefore what becomes primary is the selling of it over somebody else's product, and it starts to take it into another arena. Mm-hmm. One of the things I've always tried to encourage, especially among the arts and theater in particular, is a kind of collective working together, in terms of what we're all about in theater, why we're doing theater, what our responsibilities are, what our relationships are to each other, to the community we function in, and to the world at large. So I don't know why you should come to my theater instead of somebody else's.
That's a great answer. I think I'll come.
Except that I like to see you there, and I feel we can have a good time together. Benny was a trombone player with Basie at the time, and Benny started going to acting school, and on the side, because everybody was quitting Basie's band at that time, so nobody had any gigs, and I decided to produce them. So I would produce these little jazz concerts. That was my first entry into the entertainment field.
He went from one stage to another stage to another stage. In the meantime, he was still Scott. I mean, he didn't bend to anything that he didn't want to do. He just lay back and look at it and decide how he wanted to do it Scott's way.
Okay. Well, what is Pipeline?
Pipeline was a not-for-profit corporation that I started in LA, an arts organization, which really consisted of 3 theaters beginning in 1981. It's the Factory Place Theater, the Boyd Street Theater, and another theater called the Wallen Boyd. And I ran those theaters throughout the 80s and continued my work in other venues up until the time I left there about 6 months ago.
Okay. Well, before we get into more about your work, I want to talk about some of your personal background. You're a native of New York, and
Right.
you have family there and worked in the family business for a while. And tell me what that was like.
Well, actually, I was being groomed for a family business, which was the jewelry business. And this took place in the 60s. And it was a very exciting time. And I found my life very, very boring. I was married and had a very, very secure position with the family business. And along came the 60s. And somebody told me to check out an acting school. Might bring some passion into my life. So I went to acting school for about 2 years. And it was really boring. Fortunately, there were some very exciting things happening on the Lower East Side in New York, especially in theater. All kinds of unusual experiments going down in places like La Mama, St. Mark's, and you might even say a revolution of sorts. And I got very turned on by that. And after about 2 years in acting school, it felt almost like a bad job, you know, sort of like you spend most of your time trying to get your image together and trying to get somebody to let you be in a play. And then there was this incredible activity going down on the Lower East Side, which seemed to be both political and spiritual in nature. And I decided to forget about a career in theater and just have a good time doing it. So fortunately for me, I fell in with some very, very exciting people who turned me on to the potential of art, and especially the potential of art in theater. And it was just a matter of time before I quit my job, quit the family business, and decided be an artist. Lots of times I'd go into the factory, always trying to get the girls high. And they'd see me coming as much as they like me and everything. It's like, oh, Scott, please, you know, don't get me in trouble. But anyway, I was in the factory one day, talking to some of the women. And by this time I was convinced that I was working for capitalist pigs, because it was a pretty decent-sized business, and everyone who had a decent-sized business in those days, through the eyes of someone who was pretty naive, who was pretty much an asshole. Everybody in that position, of course, was a capitalist pig. So unfortunately, I started to see my father as a capitalist pig. And this one day I was in the factory, and my uncle decided to be authoritative, and he came into the factory and he came over to me and he said, you know, you're wasting time. Get in the office. You have work to do. Get in the office. So I said, okay. And here I was. I started to walk toward the office, but I held this position. And as I started to walk, my uncle stayed behind me because he wanted to make sure that I didn't turn around and go back the other way. So he was walking behind me to make sure I got in the office, and I started to walk in slow motion, which is something we've been practicing a lot in some of the theater exercises. And here I was with my hands like this, my uncle behind me, walking toward the office in slow motion. And as I'm walking down the aisles, flanked on either side by women who are working with these machines that made these wax impressions of the rings that would eventually be converted into gold. All they would do each day is like, they would push, fill the mold up with wax, let it cool, then they would open it up, take the wax ring out, and then do the next one. That's what they did all day. And so I'm walking down the aisle like this, and I know each one personally, and I stop at each bench, and I just look at them. I look them straight in the eye, and they don't even want to look at me, but I won't move until they look at me. So here I am like this, here's my uncle behind me, they look up, and I give them some acknowledgement and I move on to the next one. Meanwhile, I can almost feel this heat behind me. And I just keep walking. I go, stop at the next one, look at her, wait for her to look at me. She looks at me, smile, next one. It probably takes about 20 minutes before I finally get to the office. And by the time we get to the office, and I've done this number with maybe 10, 15 women already, my uncle collapsed at a desk like he's having a heart attack. And he's banging on the desk, and he's banging on the desk, and he's just ranting and raving, and he's saying, what did you do? 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 And the secretary in the office is running and getting him water, and someone else is doing this. My father comes running in, and he says, like, what's going on here? What's going on? What happened? And my uncle says, you don't know what he did. You don't know what he did. And my father said, well, what did you do? I said, well, I was in the factory and I was talking to so-and-so, and he came in and he said, get in the office. And I said, okay, I'll get in the office. And so this is what I did. And I came into the office. And my father looked at my uncle and he said, is that what he did? My uncle said, that's what he did. That's what he did. That's what he did. Really been free. I mean, it always been either school or the army or working for my father, but I'd never really had any period of time where I wasn't beholden to something or someone, you know, and then suddenly I could do whatever I wanted, you know, and I think the whole world, I still remember that day shone. Everything was like just shining. The potential was like endless. Which I came to realize it always was and always would be endless. It was only me who put the limitations on things.
Yeah, we'd meet at the Cafe 50s, and he'd just go on. I'm doing great things, Barsha. I found new things with this stuff. We're really going out there.
His mind was always just roaming around with his work and with what else was going on around him. And he'd just say, okay, Annette, get up, come on, try this. And he'd give me some direction. And I would just do it.
I went to LA and I went to the class. Beth took me to the class and she said, I want you to meet this man. And I'm going to this acting class. And I thought, okay, great. And I took my book along, you know, so that I could read while she was doing this. And I walked into the class, I walked through the door, and it was like being in an altered state. And everybody was doing the walking exercise, and everybody was totally present, and that was it for me.
A few times I've been asked in interviews why I do experimental theater. And my response has always been to the interviewer, how come you ask me why I do experimental theater? If art by its very nature is experimental, why don't you ask everybody else why they keep doing reactionary theater? So I think I just do theater, you know, with art being experimental by its very nature.
Now I'm back on the superhighway, but I'm on the other side. And I too am rushing toward end. All the cars I pass could be wide, or they pass me. On the opposite lane, all the cars moving the other direction could be seen in his self-delusion. Or else, why too is stuck in a telephone booth? It's called my house, May. Not finding me in, she has realized I am going to be. She has turned around. Now we are both speeding in opposite directions, moving away from each other. And the car I pass, or that passes me, is Steve, who also tried to find one at the halfway point.
And sound and movement really is about animating the body through these cycles and allowing these cycles to change without sacrificing the integrity of the cycle. In order to do that, there are certain elements that we learn in order to sustain the cycle and let it continue both in sound and movement. And it's called being on the train. So I might be on the train right now. So I'm on the train now, and I am looking for an image to inform me of some reality that strikes me. So this can be worked also with me having a particular theme in mind, or else I can just be working in a search for image. And then, as I discover something, I take it off the train, which in this case is this state of being, and then when I'm ready to continue on, I'm back on the train again, searching for the next reality, Puma! A puma! A puma! A puma! A puma!
And at that time, Scott Kelman's workshop in Wallen Boyd Theater, a lot of strong characters in his workshops. So I asked Scott if I could draw those, students. And I took a class too, but I was so happy to be in America. For me, that was America. But later I found out these are all like avant-garde type of very, far out personalities. But for me, it was like a human being in front of me, moving. So in my way, I went to Scott's workshop to forget that I'm alone. There's a people in this world. And it was kind of safe for me to be in Scott's class.
So you two are leaders of the Avant-Garde Theater.
Are we leaders?
Yeah. But Scott, I read that you actually came to LA to die.
To die.
That's
to
true?
Die. Still waiting.
Oh yeah, well, as are most of us. But instead, you founded Pipeline in 1982.
Right, right.
You've produced over 200
something like that
pieces. That's amazing.
Yeah.
When and how did you first meet Kedrick?
Actually,
That occurred shortly after I opened my first theater, which was the Factory Place Theater.
Uh-huh.
And a mutual friend of ours, Liz Shepard, told me about this character named Kedrick, who was an actor. And so Kedrick and I met, and I asked him to tell me something about him, because most of the things that I've done have really come out of my relationships with people rather than me reading scripts and different things like that. And Kedrick started telling me about different things he had done, plays, movies, and everything like that. I wasn't too interested in that. So when I asked him to tell me something interesting, he told me a story about how after Watergate, he dressed up as an angel, in an angel costume with huge wings and everything like that, and with a golden broom, went to Washington, started to clean up. And he continued doing this around the country and Canada as well. And was sort of on a mission, I guess, of some sort. And he did that for about 4 months until the tension got to be too great and he came back to Topanga. That kind of turned me on. And so I told Kedrick that I wanted to produce him. And he asked me, what should I do? I said, just do Kedrick.
Uh-huh.
And he ended up composing a piece that we eventually collaborated on. And the evening was called Our Kedrick. Ran for 10 months.
Wow.
And the rest is history.
It was me beating me, and I went out. When I came to, I found my head resting in her lap. No, I cried when I opened my eyes and saw what she did. Like the talons of a hawk, the nails of her fingers hooked deep in the flesh of her face. I snatched them away. There was a trickle of blood. It ran down her cheeks and mingled with mine. Our eyes met and caught in a limitless gaze. And she and I, with one voice, in unison said, why are we doing this to ourselves?
Yes?
Mrs. Rachel Taylor,
Yes?
I'm Detective Burke, and this is Detective Kendricks. I'm afraid we have some terrible news.
Terrible news.
Now, what was I going to say?
Someone asked me on
Oh,
set.
the obsessive love.
Right.
Now, is this out of personal experience?
Of course it is. That's what that's why the show works.
Kedrick told me that he had a great night. I mean, so the audience was over the top, and they were so with it and reacting and full. It was just like, yikes, it's like too good or whatever. And he came off stage and he went back, and Scott said, we got a lot of work to do. We got to start all over.
I never knew a man could move that fast, let alone a drunk. It had struck a nerve. He snapped from that stupor, sprang across the shop, and I'd never seen a punch before in my life, not a real one. Oh, but God, I never have to see another one. But I am glad I saw that one. It took its genesis somewhere in the distance over his right shoulder, and then one leg came off the ground, and he leaned into it as he buried that punch right straight in that fat hog farmer's face. There was a pink spray, and a shrapnel of broken dentures filled the air as he went rattling down between the chairs. Stunned from the blow and the fall, his eyes bugging out of his head, pleading at the razor in Warren's hand, quivering on the flesh of his jugular. Just like that, You fat! Ain't never done nothing in your whole fucking life, cocksucker! And just so's you don't ever have to ask again, I bled them two right on the spot. But I'm gonna let you crawl away to rot, nice and slow, out there on your place with the rest of you hogs. Now get out of here, you son of a bitch, and don't you never come back.
You two would appear to be somewhat different because, Kedrick, you're a non-smoking vegetarian who lives in Topanga with a house that you built yourself that has no electricity.
Now, wait a second. I came from a farm before I came here. I was living on a farm
In New
outside
York.
of Woodstock.
But
Yeah.
you were
okay.
eating meat and smoking, see?
Yeah. In fact, I probably had one of the first health food restaurants in the United States. It was in a little town called Fleischmann's, New York, and it was called the Iowa City Bicycle and Free Ballooning Society of Fleischmann's, New York.
Easy thing to put on a
But I
business
used to
card.
eat down the block because we
Yeah.
didn't. we
It was
didn't
just a
serve
business for you.
hamburgers.
You didn't. Yeah. But no, you've had 4 heart attacks?
4, yeah. 2 major, 2 minor.
2 major.
2 on the East Coast, 2 on the West Coast.
It's still ticking.
So working together is no problem because of these disparities.
No.
Not at all. Maybe that's what
Complement
unites
each
us.
other.
We complement each other, yes. Yes, I think so. Even though it gets a little rough at times.
Yeah, he stops my heart from time to time.
Walls of water moving wider, moving deeper, moving faster. The Moses May had parted the White Sea, and with the children safely through, it would come clapping close. Pharaoh's chariots lost forever in the swirling foam. Holy River Mother Ganges overflow, Tigris and Euphrates, spilling spring floods into the fertile crescent where all life began. God
Someone wanted to kill Tom? Why?
Well, that's what we're trying to find out. Now, can you think of anybody who might have been angry with your husband?
No.
Any strange correspondence, beef with an employee, sudden mood swing, something like that?
No, nothing.
Can you think of anything maybe a little bit weird or unusual, something out of the ordinary that might have happened lately? Like a dramatic change in his routine or some financial transaction?
Now that you mention it.
Let me explain.
I applaud your selection.
Oh, I can start the piece off the same way.
I applied for a grant.
I got the grant. Rick Sims.
Yeah.
I'm Detective Burke. Homicide. This is Detective Kendricks.
Homicide.
You know a man named Tom Taylor?
No.
Well, maybe I can refresh your memory. You worked at a party of his.
I work for a lot of people. Doesn't mean I know him personally.
Well, you personally cashed a $10,000 check of Taylor's.
Now that's a whole lot of money for a tequila twirler, I'd say, wouldn't you? $10,000.
Yeah, well, I'm good at what I do.
Well, I like to think I am, too. You see, Taylor's dead. And I think you did it. Creep.
Hey, Lieutenant. It's a nice scratch he has over his eye. How do you suppose he got that?
Mind if we come in?
Hey, Kojak, you got a warrant?
Thought you'd never ask.
from you guys?
Closing is it?
I know, time
It's
flies
not
when you're
time,
I was
right?
getting the signal, right?
Well, just, I think the show is a real treat, and is it okay if I give the number?
And the third element?
Well, actually, it's the third state. It's called RAP. And all the states and all the work, the approach to all of it is through a physical awareness as well as everything else, but utilizing the body. So even when we move into rap, it's kind of like sound and movement in that rapping also becomes utilizing the body to get to words. And the commitment comes from a commitment to the body in search of rhythm and energy, and that starts to conjure up the words. And there's a bunch of elements we work with over here. One is that you can break the linear line whenever you want, and you keep this rap going. When you discover something that you like, you can cycle it. You can cycle it. You can cycle it. But the objective of the exercise is to really keep the rap going all the time, break the linear line if you want, and this is in the search for words that come up from the unconscious, and then when something comes up that you like, you can cycle it. That you like, you can cycle it. That you like, you can cycle it. And these words eventually become narrative or they become dialogue, depending upon how they're treated. All of these three states later on are then integrated and played off one another. And these are just simple explanations. Sat and got fat, got really fat until it fell. It fell and broke its head. It plopped open heads rolling down the street like a bowling ball. 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 You know, is it like having a real strong box or having a few secrets in terms of what supermarkets you might be able to go to on a regular basis to get your food? I mean, so it's these sort of like little things that probably create the different structures in Skid Row. You know, the ones who are well off are the ones who have certain information that other people don't have.
It seems to me that maybe your work with the poor and homeless is a way of welcoming people back into the human race without having to qualify for a mortgage or a rental contract. So how did you get these people together, and what did you do, and what are they doing, and what else are you going to do about it?
Actually, it didn't happen that way at all. What happened was when I first got to LA and started to check it out, I decided that I needed a space to do theater in, and space was pretty expensive. And people told me about downtown and told me not to go downtown. But there was something about downtown that attracted me, aside from the price. And I opened my theaters downtown. Then there was talk that there would be this whole renaissance happening in downtown LA. This was the early 80s. So I opened like the first theaters down there. And it turned out that the homeless people were my neighbors because I was really right on the border of Skid Row. And I got to know a number of the people on the street pretty well. And somebody introduced me to a guy who had just kind of arrived from Memphis or someplace like that, a real character that they had found on Hollywood Boulevard, playing a flute and leading a parade of people, almost like the Pied Piper, and figured he should meet me. And they brought him to me, and he became my security guard. And he would dress up in this whole outfit, and he was called the Avant-Gardian. And he also got to know a lot of people on the street, you know, when he was looking after the theaters. And he wasn't like a, you know, this kind of a security guard. He used to just charm people and play practical jokes and everything. Very endearing figure. Somebody told me about a group of homeless people that were meeting at an office and trying to get a piece together, headed by a guy named John Malpete, and I should go check him out.
So I went down to this office, and a number of the people were actually people who had been in mental institutions and stuff like that. And they were trying to get this piece together. And the rehearsal process was like really fascinating. I mean, because nobody could remember lines. People were having arguments all the time, cracking jokes. John Malpede was going crazy, you know. And I just watched this event one evening, and I walked out of there, and I couldn't believe the insanity of the evening with these people trying to get through this piece, and how in the world are they ever going to get through the piece, you know? And it was a process that everybody agonized over. I mean, there was one guy, his name was Jim Beam. He wrote the piece. He was like one of these guys who, when you walked in and you looked at him, like he would just curse and curse and curse and all these words. I can't say them on television. Right? They just come out of his mouth like this and like that and da-da-da, and then he'd just walk away. And I'd follow him into another room, and he'd just blah, 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 and he'd walk into another room. And I'd just follow him into another room. And then one day he just went, hey man, why don't you leave me alone? What do you want?
We're standing, our voice was saying, this land is made for you and me. Hey!
The attempt of this project is to be able to provide just one of the elements of life that other people have. This one related to the arts, so even though they don't have permanent places to live or anything like that, life still goes on for them, and they still function, and they still have the same needs as everybody else. So today it's showbiz.
Scott had a fantasy. His modus operandi was to transform it into a reality, and that was his fuel. The transformation of fantasy into reality.
During the first year, 85, I think really 84, 85, Scott and I sat and figured out we opened, I think, 53 shows in 1 year. 53 fully mounted productions.
At the Wallenboy Theater, Scott's Theater in Los Angeles, downtown. And I could sense this sort of, in the 80s in downtown LA, there was a community of artists and theater people, and it felt a little like the 60s, like seekers, searchers, trying to get to the essence of the moment, of the truth.
So Scott really got it, and he lived it. I mean, he was willing to say, right down to the bottom of his life, I want to live in that unknown space. I want to create that space for others so that they can have that experience of finding out that there's somebody home. It's not that there's nobody home. There's somebody home after all, when you let go of all those moves you think you need to make. And that's what the theater was about.
These are traditional plays. But Scott never was into any of that. He was into the more sort of this like raw creative process.
And if a guy makes the fast break and he goes for it and he passes the ball behind the back, which was not practiced, and to the other guy over on the left, it better not hit him in the head. The other guy better have peripheral vision, have it, know we changed and we're working with you, grab the ball and go in and sink it. But to get an acting group to do that, because most actors will say, oh, you stopped with that line. I thought you were going to say this, or I thought you were going to be standing over there. No, you do that on a champion basketball team, you're fired. You know, like, what do you mean? Yeah, it's supposed to be, we're working together and work with it, play with it. And that's what that's what the exercise we really aim for creating a cohesive unit.
A kind of place where it's like, why am I doing this? You know, because you can get so lost in it that you forget that you're also a part of the world, and that everything you do, every element that you practice, has a relationship to the world that we all live in. And if it doesn't, why bother practicing it, right? Think of everything on this side of the line as the space or the stage. All right? And the way I would like to begin is
that you come with the attitude that when you cross over the line, or whatever part of you crosses over the line is, by the very nature of crossing over the line, in performance. I give up all creative responsibility. The line takes care of it. I just say yes. Okay, so as I cross over the line, whatever is on this side of the line is now in performance. This is performing. This belongs to the regular world. Okay? Now, as I cross completely over the line, I am, by the very nature of being here, in performance.
And I come upon this cult of Kelman. That's why I'm wearing orange. Scott's workshops had this element of improv that was very similar to jazz. Sort of not free jazz, but jazz with a structure, and then you improvise off of some chord changes or some sort of sound and movement. And I went, wow, I understand this musically.
Is theater dying? And if it is, can it be revived?
I think it's dying for a number of reasons, one of which is economic. I think one of the problems we have today as far as live performance is concerned is that technology controls the minds and hearts of the entire population today. It reaches in and it grabs you, so that where years ago everybody could sort of, or a lot of people could make a living from performing, now you don't have to leave your living room. The technology permits entertainers to reach out into your living room, grab you, hold you. And so in that respect, I think that's affected the life of theater. Makes it too easy for people to get whatever they want in their living rooms. So I think that's contributing to the death of theater. And also, I think theater's contributed a lot to its own demise in that it refuses, for the most part, to relate to that which is immediate.
Scott's work is very linear. It's not linear in the typical Hollywood storyline in a logical mind way, but it's linear in the human energetic way. And if you watch what, not just humans, but all forms of physical nature, that it will go from a quiet to a build to an intense to this climax to this lyric. Gabriel Roth talks about these 5 rhythms. It's just this natural pattern. You watch a river go, it starts at a very quiet lake and slowly builds and slowly starts to go down the stream and then down rocks, and then it starts a heavier stream, and then pretty soon it finds this waterfall and it's crashing down. Wow, it's crashing down, and the water hits the base and the water's bubbling up, and then it moves on, and then it moves on. Pretty soon it's in this really quiet stream again. That's a very organic process.
You know, people are always talking about wanting something larger than life. Most of the plays or the dramas that you see in theater now, you know, especially in the psychological, naturalistic mode of people acting as they act in real life, okay, I mean, we're looking for things that are supposedly bigger than life, and I often think of that as us looking for things to be as large as life really is. It's just that we relate to things and to ourselves as something smaller than what we really are, okay?
How's your work different from the work that's done in traditional schools?
Well, traditional schools are really set up just the opposite. I mean, there's all the pressure to get it together, you know, get out there and look good, you know. Traditional schools are really concerned also with the process of how to take words from a page And very often the pages even tell you where to go to, or the director tells you where to go to, you know, and to interpret that thing so it becomes a live event. So you always feel like you have to go in there with something. This is the creative process. It's much, much different. It's really about creating an environment in which you are serving only as a conjurer. And out of your conjuring, through the exercises, things come up and inform you. Okay? And now you make a choice as to whether you want to go with that one or not.
Would they make the atom bomb a picnic? An honest-to-God picnic.
Whole concept of going downtown to this like little factory place, you know. Again, taking a freight elevator to get up there, and I think it was very exciting for LA, you know, for the artists that got it. It was wonderful, and he started attracting good people.
So we went out afterwards, Scott and I, and so he started asking, what are you asking for? What are you looking for? And he said, I'm looking for a space to work out of. I want to get it. He said, well, God, let's do it together. And literally that night, after meeting each other for a couple of hours, was the beginning of, okay, yeah, we can do this. We didn't know each other. I didn't know really who he was. I knew there was a connection, there was an electric connection between us.
But who can deny they saw something worth seeing? Wouldn't you have gone on a bomb picnic? Be honest now.
You've got a slight aversion to the industry, though.
Not really. I mean, I have an aversion to what the industry produces.
Or represents?
No, what they produce, and I guess you could ultimately say what it represents, in that the industry seeks to be commercial. And my problem with that is, to be commercial, you have to appeal to a large number of people. And I'm always befuddled by their constantly seeking to relate to the lowest common denominator in people rather than the higher common denominator in people.
So, getting back to the whole thing of audience participation, I think it's how you perceive theater now, you know, and it's very necessary, I think, that theater be perceived as a celebration, which takes place in the room itself, rather than just up on the stage. There's us having a party for you. I mean, it's just not enough anymore. You know, we all have to join in that party. And so it has to do, and sometimes it's very subtle, understanding our roles in the celebration so that the audience has as vital a role in the celebration as we on the stage. And it's a sharing experience rather than us up here getting all your approval and all your love and all your applause so that we can walk out and feel a lot better about ourselves. fa, 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 fa. I could make like I was Steve McQueen and the Cincinnati Kid. And somewhere down the line, what I started to pick up on was that everything had the potential for a theater piece. I mean, even a moment could be played from all different angles for an hour and had the potential of a theater piece, as well as stories and different things like that. Also, what happened, I guess I had my first heart attack in the mid-70s, a massive heart attack. And I remember I was at a party one day, and I was approached by two psychiatrists who came to me with this disdain and said to me, "Why do you think you had your heart attack?" And right away I got a bit defensive and I said, "For my next piece, of course," and I walked away. And then I realized it was true, that it's all just grist for the mill. So now, whenever something happens to me, I don't have to agonize as to why did this happen to me. I know it's for the next piece, whenever that happens. I ended up having another heart attack, which made two on the East Coast. And I had a sister in California that wanted me to move out there and join her, you know. And I kept telling her that I would never move to California because I knew it was Babylon, and I would be susceptible to Babylon, and I would not move there until it was time to die. After my second heart attack, I decided it was time to move to California.
Okay.
And things kind of worked out nicely in that I had two heart attacks on the East Coast, and I had two heart attacks on the West Coast, which gave me a nice symmetry for a piece that I'm working on now called Angina, an Affair of the Heart, which I hope to be performing sometime this year.
Good, great. We're going to look forward to that. One of the things that I wanted to ask
takes us to the critic and the role of the critic. Because those are the people who steer people in a particular direction, you know.
I don't even read the critic.
Well, a lot of people do.
Okay.
Sometimes fortunately, but as far as I'm concerned, usually unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because I believe that, just as we have a particular responsibility, the critic has a particular responsibility. And very often I find that the critic, especially the more successful ones, the ones that have the power, have the control, they fall into the same traps as the performers and the directors who get a particular reputation, and now what's at stake is one's reputation, and one's vested interest.
Yes, absolutely.
And so we need the same kind of daring from critics, the same kind of inquisitive kind of minds, the same kind of curiosity that they expect from us. And this has been something that I've been, talking about for a long time.
And I sat through the award ceremonies, and eventually they called him up and he accepted his award, and he was very gracious, and he thanked everyone, and I believed for the first time that I saw him be diplomatic and gracious. And then after he got through thanking everybody, he just stared around the audience, and I thought, please, don't do it. And he did. He just looked at everyone and said, so where the fuck has everybody been when I needed the money?
There was the Margaret Harford Award
which is an award given by the LA Theater Critics, and I forget the exact quotes as to why I got the award. I think it says something like,
I have that
it's
here.
over there.
It's for unwavering commitment to innovative theater for LA that is unashamedly experimental and unapologetically political.
Okay, so it's supposed to be the most prestigious theater award given every year or every other year, and one year I got it for that. And I realized that that was the kiss of death, because once you're defined, you can no longer outrage the powers that be. So when all the awards started to come in, maybe 5, 6, 7 years after I opened the theaters and we started to get some recognition and acclaim, I knew it was just a matter of time before the trip was over.
What Scott was doing with one-person shows was just revolutionary, in which I think there's this impact you still see 20 years later of people standing up and doing their memoirs or talking about their lives, and how Scott crafted that. I remember talking to him about that too. He says, we don't have any money for a big cast, and we don't have any money for scenery, so we're gonna do theater of poverty, which of course was not just something he'd made up, but it was this real term and a real philosophy, and he followed it, and he did it in a way that was true and authentic and had power, and the power really communicated, and people came, we got awards, and the audience worked.
It was kind of the most immediate access to not only a space, but to a producer who encouraged people to come in and have access to his space. Because most people who have spaces don't want anybody there. They just want the space. They don't want to have anybody do anything there, ever. They just want the clean, pristine space. Don't touch the wall, don't scratch the floor, don't sit in that chair. And Scott was like, take the chair, throw it against the wall. Now take the coffee pot, smash it, throw it, boom! Ben, all right, yeah, you want a hammer, hit the floor. No, wait, well, not that part of the floor, the other, okay, that part of the floor you can, and it was just, it was great to actually feel wanted.
No answer! I allow the rain of return coins to pour down with joy. It is clear that Roy could not overcome her impatience. She has got into her car. She has rushed to an aid. Now I'm back on the superhighway, but I'm on the other side. I too am rushing to an aid. All the cars I pass could be Y, or they pass me on the opposite lane. All the cars speeding in the other direction could be Z. It is self-delusion.
This is all experimental, okay? Because so much of the creative process has to do with where you put your head. That's why I spend time with this, because the mental part is really important. If you can master the mental part, you can do anything. Working with my chest. So in other words, I sustain a kind of consciousness, not only of what I'm doing and what I'm making, but what I am from moment to moment to moment.
You're not faking things or putting things on, but that it all arises, and that you just go with it. It arises and you discover it, and it's already there, and you go, oh, and you just say yes to it, as opposed to putting it on.
No matter
the time on your clock or the date on your calendar. This moment will never change. To be anywhere other than in this present moment invites insanity.
People just don't like
You can only be truly sane in this moment. In fact, you can only be truly anything.
Is that bird shit? Why me?
It's got love!
Everything you do, everything has got you
There was a theater director here during a dress rehearsal who's been doing theater in this town for a long time. And I like to keep the house lights on, at least lightly, so that the actors can truly engage the audience. And he was trying to explain to the actors that you don't really need to turn the house lights on, because for the audience, it looks like you really see us. And I said, that's the difference between your theater and the theater I do. You know, that's about image, the image of seeing the audience, but we really want the exchange.
The skills we work with in Scott's work is everything I'll utilize in the group work that I do or in a psychotherapeutic format. It's a very different intent, but the interactive skills are very much there. The mindfulness skills, paying attention to what's happening in the whole room, what's going on between my connection between myself and a group member, or it's the same thing, myself and the audience, or myself and my fellow performers. So it's really felt very natural, and having gone to the Naropa Institute, which is now the Naropa University, which is a Buddhist-inspired non-sectarian university, that was all about mindfulness practice.
My daughter came to visit and see Tao Soup last night, and I was staying at Scott's house, and here's this old geezer sitting on the sofa watching Fox News, and I'm thinking to myself, what's my kid gonna think? Why do all these people get attracted to this guy? What's the deal? And the reason Scott was watching Fox News is because he's curious. He's curious about what makes these people tick. I mean, he's not one of them, but I think that curiosity has something to do with his whole thing about being in the moment, and he's a seeker.
So much trust in Scott and his, sensibilities and his artistic integrity that, I mean, there were a lot of things he suggested that we do that in the beginning I thought, that sounds terrible. Like, that sounds so stupid. Why would we fly around and act like birds?
Bladder and bowels empty. Body begins to decompose. Body is now the temperature of the surrounding environment.
Years ago, nobody used the word cool except hipsters. Now everybody uses the word cool, right? Mothers, teachers, nurses.
People don't use groovy much anymore. They don't, and that's I think it's
No, people stopped using groovy, but groovy never moved into the mainstream, I don't think. What was that song again?
So groovy.
Feeling Groovy? That was a Crosby, Stills and Nash, wasn't it?
So groovy.
Feeling Groovy.
I think I've got the wrong song. What are the words?
I forget, but it was in one of their songs,
Yeah,
I
it
think.
definitely was.
Groove is a groovy word.
It is. It's got a good sound to it. Oh, he loves me on camera, doesn't he?
Relates that he was practically dead, like gone. And he saw this angel. This is the way he says it. And I really think he saw this. I really think he felt it. He doesn't make these things up. And he starts telling us about, no, you can't go. You're not ready to go. You're not ready to come with me. And so he would just turn around and he came back.
Scott's life was the theater, and the theater was his life. He loved to explore his curiosity and just grow, and always thinking how something might work as a theater piece. And the ultimate in that was in my last conversation with Scott on the phone for about an hour and a half, maybe 8 hours before he died. He was talking about writing a new solo piece for himself about pain. And I thought that was the ultimate final melding of life and theater for him, that he would maybe provide pleasure to people by sharing his pain.
But at the end, and I guess this is coming to the end, if I look back upon the whole thing, I must say, of all the people I know that I've spoken to in theater, I don't know anyone that's had more fun than me, you know. I mean, I'm really happy with the life it gave me, and I was lucky that I could afford to not have to depend entirely upon the money I made from it in order to survive, you know. I was just lucky that I had the means, if I lived modestly, to be able to do something like this. Because I certainly had a lot of good times, you know. And I was able to be with a lot of people for a much longer period of time than most people who are in the arts have to share with a certain amount of people. Usually you do the project, it's over, and you go on, you know. I think almost anybody I've ever worked with over the years, when I see them, whether it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago or even 40 years ago, when we see each other, it's like, oh yeah, we worked on this together, you know. And it was somehow different from other things that they had done with other people. I feel good about that. And then other times I think all of this stuff that we're talking about, this is all like a figment of your imagination and their imagination, or maybe they're just humoring you. And so none of it was real to begin with, you know, it was all just a dream. But then I go around in that circle, but it's all a dream anyway. I mean, the work is all about that. It's about a dream, you know. And the problem is not that. The problem is that it wasn't even more of a dream. That it wasn't enough of a dream, you know. That the dream was kept down. That we didn't dream enough, you know. And on a certain level, when it comes to the end, which I think it's coming to, it doesn't even matter, you know. It doesn't even matter if you can just go out and just say, bye. It's been nice, you know. That's all that matters, maybe.
And tell me your thoughts on Scott.
Mr. Kellman. A genius.
A genius, huh? Okay.
A shit.
Okay. So there's nothing really endearing about him, is there?
His ears, the hair going.
His ears, huh?